Hey, welcome to Average Joe Interviews with Logan Tyler. I am the titular Logan Tyler. The reason this podcast came to be is because at one point I had the chance to interview somebody pretty famous, and they were insanely boring. So I realized, man, everyday people are a lot more interesting than this guy. I've spoken to people who have insane stories, so I thought, why don't I get my friends or associates or however I know people to get on this podcast and tell their life stories, because I feel like people will be generally interested in it. So I found one of the most interesting people that I know, probably going to be one of the most interesting people you guys hear from, my buddy Bryson. What's up, Bryson?
Hey, how's it going, Logan? How you doing?
Doing good. We haven't spoken, except for like a few minutes before this, obviously. Like, I'm not going to act like I just called you. But we haven't spoken in depth probably for 8 or 9 years, which is crazy.
Yeah, I think it's probably about that time. Like, I was thinking about that before. I was like, oh my gosh, it's been so long since we've like really caught up. So I'm super excited about this.
Yeah, when me and Bryson met, I was going into high school. It was my first day of high school, and I had a band that I was playing with like before high school, and essentially we were really terrible, but we also needed a rhythm guitarist who was like equally terrible, so he'd be like willing to join. And not to say that he's terrible, but for the other bands in the realm, we were not exactly like the most metal band. But what happened is I knew this guy, Will, from previous years. He had moved to LaPorte and then moved back away. And I was talking about, like, I really need a guitarist, like, really bad. I need somebody to do rhythm guitar, but we also need somebody to work on riffs and stuff because our other guitarist just, like, kind of was in, like, a writing block. And this Will guy was like, my brother plays guitar. And I was like, who's your brother? And he points to, he's at my lunch table, he points to the most aggressively emo-looking kid I've ever seen in my whole life. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to go talk to him. So I just got up, I walked right up to you, and I just go, you're in my band now. And you like half chuckled and were like, what? I was like, band practice is this day. You're like, okay.
Yeah, and I take no offense to like the bad rhythm guitar part, because like, dude, absolutely. Like, I was like just excited to be a part of a band finally. And I think like when I met you, it was when we came back to the high school together. So I moved around a lot growing up, and it was my first year being back in LaPorte where we grew up. And I was like, okay, like I'm kind of rekindling relationships, getting to know people. Like, I sort of been playing guitar for a couple of years. Like, I'm excited to kind of get involved. And then you show up like, I don't know, a couple months in, I'm like, this is it. This is my opportunity.
And it was so funny because it was like, I had only seen you that day once before, and we walked by each other in the hallway, and I was an aggressively like goth wannabe emo kind of kid. So I saw you, and I saw like your really tight pants, and I'm like, that's my kind of guy right there. So I waved you on. I was like, hey, and you didn't say anything, and I was like, you probably didn't hear me. And then like later that day, of course, I asked you to join the band. I'm pretty sure the next day we start heading to Landon's house. Shout out to Landon, to do band practice. And you brought the tiniest amp I've ever seen in my entire life.
Yeah, let's just say my music instrument ensemble was not very like up to date. I had a Les Paul custom, and that was like my favorite guitar. So of course I brought that. But yeah, the rest of my equipment, man, was not like up to par at all.
What was crazy though is like the band itself was like already on the verge of breaking up just because we were all in high school and we all had different cliques. But you and I, pretty instantly, like there was a chemistry, bro. Like, we understood what we wanted musically. We understood what we wanted like friendship wise. Like, we were always like exactly what we needed for each other at that time. And we just clicked. But when the first band broke up, I don't remember why it broke up. I can't remember anymore. But you and I like just started right up, and we started writing music. And like, you know, people can say what they want about how good or bad the music was. It was heartfelt, man. We put a lot of work into that music.
Yeah, I agree. And honestly, like, cause I remember us like the full band breaking up, whatever, and we had like a lot of fun. Obviously, like we did some recordings and like tried to like get it out there.
Mm-hmm.
But some of my best memories was like when we broke up, and then it was just kind of us two, and we were doing sort of like acoustic things. And like, I know like we covered Hurt, you know, the Johnny Cash cover from Nine Inch Nails,
which made my grandmother cry. We went to my grandmother's house and played all this music for her, and like she was so happy about it.
Yeah. Like I remember that too. And like probably like one of my favorite moments is when you and I were like sort of like got some of our music down and we're like, all right, we want to share it with people. And we did that open mic night in LaPorte, if you remember that. And we sort of like, because none of us had cars at this time, we just kind of walked there with our equipment.
Yeah.
And it was great.
I remember, because we had only, this is pretty crazy, but Bryson, we had only been doing it for like 2 weeks when we did that open mic thing. We only had 3 songs and we had written them within like 2 weeks of doing the Java Gyms thing, which I think was what it was called, right?
Yeah, Java Gyms, man. And I remember like, cause I get real nervous when I'm in front of people, especially when I'm performing. And like, I remember you and I were like in the back behind the bar and we're just sort of practicing and talking about the set and like what we were going to do. And I was like, internally, I was like, dude, I'm like so nervous to myself. And I was like, I kind of just can't wait for us like to get up there, do it. And then whatever happens. And then at least I'll be done. But, I'm glad that it was like, once we started, I was like, okay, I love this. This is fun.
And then there was this guy, James Neary, who I actually have talked to recently. He's a nice guy. He was really good, and he played a lot, and he heard us that night, and we walked over to him, and we were like, what'd you think? Because we were so like ready for whatever kind of criticism. We were like gluttons for criticism. We're like, please tell us how it's bad. Like, we just wanted to hear about it. And he was like, actually, it was okay. And you were like, yeah, it's been like the hardest 2 weeks of our life. And he was so blown away that we were like that connected after like 2 weeks. He was like, wow, for 2 weeks, that's actually really good.
Yeah. And like I said, I mean, I think it's like the chemistry we had, like you and I became friends pretty quick and it didn't take long. And like, I think we just have like the same humor. We just did like dumb stuff and it was hilarious.
Yeah.
And like the same came through when we made music. It was like, yeah, I came up with this riff and I was like, hey man, like I'm thinking about like our song Skin or whatever that we made up. And I was like, hey, I got this kind of crazy riff. And he's like, oh, like, let me check it out. And we had Pat, right? The bassist.
Yeah, Patrick. Yeah.
And he was there and he was like, dude, no way. Like, and then he played a riff that he had thought about too. And it like matched perfectly.
Yeah. I remember.
If you remember that day.
Yeah. What happened? I remember distinctly. We worked on it like all night, and then Patrick's dad, who is like very critical, like in a good way, like he's always been that way. He was like, this is the best music you guys have written. It's got this, and that. And he's like, and I like that it's very lyrically simple. He's like, because the song's not really about what you guys are saying, it's about what you guys are doing. And I just remember thinking like that was the ultimate feedback. I'm like, Patrick's dad has our approval. Patrick and Damon, they were like our 2 biggest and only fans. They loved everything we did, like Patrick's dad and Damon, and that was like all that mattered.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, we did not have, I would say, very devoted fans, and probably just not really fans at all.
Yeah, no, it was literally like Patrick's dad and Damon. Like Damon still to this day is like, you guys should do that again. And I'm just like, well, I mean, I don't even really talk to him anymore, but that'd be cool. Like a little, like maybe on my YouTube channel, just be like a 10-year reunion of The Last Maestro, which we were because we're fools. We were misspelling maestro for several years.
So it's funny you mentioned that. This is a quick aside. So yeah, we were spelling maestro wrong, right? Because like we're high school kids, we don't know how to spell. Sure. Yeah. And that's still my gamer tag is Mistro, because I thought Mistro was how you spelled maestro.
Yeah.
Mistro Potato is my gamer tag, and I continue to use it to this day.
It's funny you say that because my gamer tag is still Last Laugh Logan. That's why it was called The Last Maestro.
Yep, there it is. There's the origin story. So if you guys like hear us on tour, there you go.
Yeah, if you guys hear us on tour, I'd love that. We should just like we should buy out the arenas and be like, we're running our own tour, and like just like 2 or 3 people show up.
Yeah. We play like 2 songs and they're like haphazardly good, and then we just leave.
They're like, this was fine.
Yeah, like I might throw up on stage, but it'll be fine. It'll be good.
That's awesome. But no, you know what? We really should sit down and do a hard recording of Skin, though, because I would love to use that for things. Like, I have so many things I could put that music on. It'd be really funny.
And you know,
cool.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, and like I was gonna say too, like I haven't been a part of like any bands or anything since, but I still like practice guitar every once in a while, and it's kind of funny that I'm just sort of practicing, and I'll go back to like those old songs that we used to play, and I'm like, dang, like that was like a lot of fun, like doing all that. And Yeah, who knows? I don't know where music would go for me. It's more of a hobby for me now, but I love kind of going back to those roots and playing those songs.
Well, you're about to get a whole lot of internet clout from being on this this podcast, so definitely ride that wave. If somebody's like, if even one person's like, you should make the music, go like run out there and make it just for the sake of making it.
Nice.
You know what I mean?
I like it. Yeah,
like that's been so accurate. Like just like I promoted my buddy Will's SoundCloud, and on one of the podcasts he did with me, and his SoundCloud like blew up afterwards. So I was like, maybe that is a good idea. But yeah, we were really close my freshman year, your sophomore year. Like we were like inseparable. And then I think it might have been sophomore year, but like we really, not intentionally, I think it's just because of like events, but we kind of like had kind of separated a little bit. You know what I mean? Like we were still friends, but you were out making music with like a different person, or like saying you were going to start a band with a different person, and I was doing my own thing. And I remember I wasn't resentful, but I was always sad that you had kind of like gone to a different friend group. And I remember I went to this show where it was at the old Game Emporium, and I was in a pit, and I got like totally demolished by this like hardcore dancer kid, and like my face got busted up. And you happened to be there, and like you took care of me. You know what I mean? Like you pulled me aside, and you were like, "Hey, let's call your dad." And it really was like, it was really important to me, because it was at a time where not only was our friendship shaky, but I was constantly being told that I was gonna have to move. So like I wasn't willing to get into like a relationship with anybody, and there was like a girl that I liked, and I had to like kind of just not do that. And I was also depressed about certain things, and you took care of me that day. And, like from that point on, I was like, okay, Bryson's like one of the good people that in my life, I think I need to like have an effort to like spend more time with him. So I started going to that youth group you went to.
Yeah. And dude, yeah, absolutely. So, classic like high school friends, right? Where it's like, you're cool for a while, and then that unstable like ground happens, and it's like, oh, like, you're with one friend group, another person with another. But same to you, man. Like on my side, I thought about you a lot. And I was like, man, I wonder how Logan's doing. Like, I want to hang out with this dude. Like, let's do that. And I think like that's one way that we bonded a lot, was like going to shows, and that was a big thing in like the town we grew up with. Like, if you were in our scene, like you went to the local shows and you like supported local artists. And I went to a lot more local shows than I did like big main stage shows.
Yeah.
And so it was like great. Yeah. Like you and I would meet up there and like kind of like Maesch and do whatever. But yeah, like the hanging out like happened a little less. And I remember that day and like kind of being there for you. And like there's that thing too when you're in a mosh pit, like you're just kind of there for each other and like helping each other out. And like it's really a beautiful thing. But yeah, like moving into like, I guess, what would that be? My sophomore into junior year, with like, starting youth group and going into that route.
Yeah. And I think the turning point, was, like, I hope it isn't like too sort of talk about this, but we were really close. And then, your dad passed, and it kind of, obviously was a horrible thing, but I think it also had a change in you where, that's when it seemed like kind of started going more to youth group and stuff. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, totally fine to talk about it. So, I say that there's really 2 points in my life that was like the most impactful, and they happened the same year. So, it was a big year, and you remember this too, but
yeah,
back in 2011. So I was a sophomore in high school, right? Spring semester, and kind of nearing the end of the semester around April, my dad actually out of nowhere surprisingly passed away. Right. So, and it sort of happened where it was a Sunday night. Right. So I went to bed, whatever, school night. Well, earlier that day, my dad had come home, from work, and, I went to sleep. Monday morning comes around, he goes back to work. And I remember him coming home after work that day. I think he got home around 3:30. And this is the Sunday before is actually Easter weekend, believe it or not. And so we spent Easter together Monday morning, right? Gets home. And he's like, he's a well driller. So, right, I come from like a hardworking family.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really like labor jobs, and so really tough on your body. And so he comes home and kind of sits down at the couch. And he was one where he hardly ever like wanted to go to the hospital, right? For any reason. He's like, it's expensive. Like we don't want that kind of like pain in our family, all that stuff. So it was a shock when I was sitting on the couch and he said like, I need to go to the hospital. And I'm like, oh, that seems bad. Like that's not good. And one of my cousins was living with me at the time. So him and my mom, my cousin and my mom took my dad to the hospital, right? And so they're like walking out the door, and little did I know at that moment that was the last time that I would ever see him again.
Yeah.
Right. So they get in the truck and they head to the hospital. I'm like a 17-year-old kid. I'm like, life's great. Like I've never really had to do like pain in my life.
Yeah.
Things are going to be fine. They're going to work out. Right. So I go throughout the rest of that day, sort of like nothing's happening. And I'm woken up to my older brother that night, and it's like 2 a.m, I remember. And he's like, hey, like you need to come upstairs. And I like, my older brother doesn't live with us at this point. So I'm like, first I was like, what are you doing here? Second, like, I'm really tired. Like what's happening right now? So, takes me upstairs, and before I know it, like I'm seeing like a lot of my immediate family, brothers, sisters, like the whole shebang. And they sit me on the couch, and after like a couple minutes of sort of awkward silence, they sort of like give me the information that, dad didn't make it. And it was one of those moments where like, it just kind of felt like numb, and like life just kind of fell around me. But it wasn't until like my sister-in-law actually like physically touched me, that I lost it. Right. Yeah. And I was like weeping, and I was like letting it all out. And, okay. So classic movie moment, right? It's raining out that night.
Of course.
Wouldn't you know it? And so I like go out the front door. I'm like trying to like internalize like what I'm feeling, what just happened, like the reality of it all. And I'm just getting soaked in the rain, and like I just kind of wanted to feel something. And so I was like, that was happening. And I was just so angry. I was so ticked. But I didn't know like who to be angry at, like why. So I should say like up until this point, like I wasn't a Christian or anything. Like faith wasn't really a big part of my life.
Yeah, I mean, I want to interject real fast with this.
Sure.
At one point, it was right after this happened. It was like not very long after you like guys had moved into a different house. And we were chilling in your new basement. It was like the first day you were there, and I remember you were kind of upset, like you were a little agitated about something, but I was just like rolling with it or whatever because I knew something was going on. And I got into an argument, like a joking argument with your girlfriend at the time, and I remember like it was so not like you, where out of nowhere you like freaked out on me, and like she was trying to calm you down. And you were just like, Logan, you're not right all the time, blah, 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 blah. And I was just like, whoa. So, like, it was very different. Like, I remember I left because I was like, okay, clearly, like, he's not ready, like, in the mood to, like, talk or anything. And, like, yeah, it was like things went radio silent there for a bit because I knew, like, for you to freak out like that, like, that things were, like, really bad for you, even though, like, you weren't letting people know it always on the surface.
Yeah. And that's so true. And like, so that whole situation happened, and like for a long time I was depressed, sort of just figuring out this grief, and just like the story you just said, right? Like, treating my friends poorly and like the people around me poorly. Cause like, I'm just mad and I'm angry at life, and, started drinking really heavily and sort of like going down that route.
Yeah. I remember that.
And, that was like the path I was on for a long time. So that was in April, and months later, so this is back. This is now September of 2011. So one of our mutual friends actually was like constantly sort of inviting me to her youth group, and I'm like, I don't really want any part of this. Like, I don't really want to go. Like, it was a Thursday night. Here's why I didn't want to go. It's Thursday night. It's from like 7 to 11 or like 6 to 11. I'm like, that's a lot of my day.
Yeah, I know, right? It was a long time. That still
Like,
reigns true. They really go for it.
they did. And I'm like, I got better things to do than spending like 4 hours like at this thing that I don't really want to go to. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
see, I thought I was like fighting it for a long time, and all of a sudden, I don't know why, but she asked me again, and I think like I had nothing to do that Thursday. I was like, sure, like we'll go check it out. You keep asking me to go, must be something to do this. Why not? So, me and a friend of mine go to the youth group, and it's chill. Like they kind of invite me in and stuff, and one of the youth pastors like, I've got tattoos, so he's like asking me about my tattoos and stuff, and we're kind of talking about that. I'm like, oh, well, this is kind of a good conversation, sure, right? But so yeah, they do that, and then they had this kind of intro, and I thought it was all lame because I'm like, this all seems kind of cliche. And
yeah,
like,
it was all
whatever.
it was like Star Wars themed youth group. So like there was like laser beams and stuff, and yeah, it was. I mean, it was a little '90s kitsch, but
Yeah, big time, right? And at that point, like I'll tell you what, I'm a huge Star Wars fan now. Like I can geek out like so much. Like don't even get me started on the Mandalorian right now because I will freak out. But back then I haven't really watched it, so I was like, I'm not really that big into the Star Wars thing. Like this whole YouTube thing seems cheesy. Like I don't want to do this. And so kind of sat in the back and going through the motions. Like they always start out with prayer, and then they did the worship, and you know me, Logan. Like coming from a guy who like we went to a bunch of local shows, we were into metal. And
yeah. I mean,
rock
you
and,
literally owned leather pants, like to give people a mental image. Like we were not the youth group type at all. We were consistently good kids. We weren't like breaking any laws really. Like we weren't like, we weren't the kind of kids that were like out doing property damage. But we were the kind that were like, nobody understands me. High school never ends. We were those kids.
Big time. Let me just describe like my favorite outfit real quick. It was my black and red shoes that were slip-ons, right? I had a black pair of skinny jeans I wore all the time, right? I had an Atreyu shirt. Shout out to Atreyu fans, right? So that was like a red and black. By the way, my favorite colors are red and black. If you hadn't picked that up yet.
Yeah. I remember how much you loved Atreyu too. It was intense.
Dude, I was super into Atreyu. I still listen to them. And I had my black and red beanie because, as you remember, I was never without my beanie. People knew me by that.
Yeah, no, you never didn't. Like, it was weird seeing you in the school without the beanie on. I'd have to like double take and be like, was that Bryson?
Like, is that what his head looks like without the hat on? Like, yeah. And so, and then I always like, classic emo style. I had the belt that wasn't actually fastened around the loopholes. It was like around my waist.
Yeah.
And it was black and red studs.
Oh, I remember very clearly. I remember absolutely. I don't know if you remember me, but I would wear the dress shirts and the ties. You remember that? It was a little intense.
Yeah, you were looking fashionable, man.
Yeah,
always.
I was always fashion forward. No.
I loved it.
It was so
But yeah,
good.
so like that was like our style, right? That's kind of what we wore. That's who we were. And so that's kind of like the person that you can, kind of jump back into the story. Like I'm in this youth group and they're playing worship music. I'm like, this is not the music I'm into. Like it's like super light and like it's like I don't know.
It's really
not, it wasn't hitting right?
Yeah.
So I kind of went through that, like listened to it, and then youth pastor went up, did his message. I can't even remember what the message was to this day. I'm like, I don't remember what he was talking about. But where it all changed was at the end. They always did like an altar call, and for those of you who might not know what that is, it's where they call you up. They say, hey, if you want to come to the front, you can sort of like kneel or pray or whatever, and in front of the cross. That's kind of what an altar call is. And so they did that. And mind you, I've never done any of this stuff before.
No, definitely not.
Never. And I was like, everybody's going up there, right? So all the kids, and I was like, I'm not gonna be the only fool back here that's not going up there. Like that just feels weird.
Yeah.
So
just like even to more exemplify the emo kid in the back, you just sit back there and don't move. Yeah, no, that you would definitely be made fun of. So
exactly. So I'm like, I'm gonna go up here. I'll humor it, whatever. Like I don't want to feel like left out or whatever. So I go up to the front, and they sort of like start playing music again, and it's just this time where I'm like left with my thoughts, right? And so we're all standing. All of a sudden, everybody starts kneeling. I'm like, oh crap! Like I don't want to be this guy that's just the only one standing. So I kneel down too. A lot of like following the motions of that. But so I'm kind of kneeling down and listening to the music and thinking about my own thoughts. And for the first time in months, I'm starting to remember and reflect on the events that happened months prior, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was really like keeping it inside, and I wasn't thinking about it. It hurt too much, right? I'm like dealing with that grief of losing my dad, and there was something about like this quietness within like kneeling down and like being in this moment with people who are also sort of like praying and doing their own thing, that it hit me just right. And I started like remembering my dad in moments, and all of a sudden, like I was feeling things I haven't felt in a long time, and I was crying, right? Yeah. And I'm like, what is happening? And I'm like feeling self-conscious. I don't want people to see me. I'm like, I don't want people to see I'm crying. Like, what's this, like, toxic masculinity? It's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, they can't know I have emotions.
Right. Like, I'm a dude. Come on.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, like, I'm a lot more of an emotional guy nowadays. But it's like, sitting there crying. I'm like trying to like hide myself with that. And all of a sudden, and it's just a random thing. I just felt this peace. And I had this like, I felt peace of my dad, and I felt peace of like where my life is right now. And I just felt like this is a turning moment. And, the altar call sort of ended. They said, you guys can go back to your seats. So I kind of went back there, sort of like brushing my eyes off, and they always did it sort of at the end of the altar call. The youth pastor went up and said, like, if you'd like to surrender your life to Jesus, like, feel free to. And like, here's how we're going to do it. And I'm left with this decision where I'm like, I haven't felt this way in months, and I haven't felt this peaceful in a long time. And no one else is going to really know that I'm doing this because like we had to close our eyes. So I'm like, do I do this? Or I make this commitment? What does it even look like? But I just felt compelled to do it. And so I, rose my hand or whatever, like that was a sign of like surrendering, and kind of went through the what the youth pastor was saying. And it was at that point in the same year that I made my second turning point and started walking the life of a Christian.
Yeah. And I mean, you've been that way since.
Yeah. And it has not been an easy ride at all. Like, I had a lot to learn, a lot to grow in, like, especially when I first became like a Christian. And, I had a lot of biases, man. And I had like a lot of like questions that were unanswered for a long time. And I was like, what does a relationship with God look like? And, all of that. And like, how do I love people well? And, a lot of like identity crisis through it.
Yeah.
To sort of like get to where I'm at now, and I'm constantly still growing.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think the process is ever done. And here's the thing I want to say about it. I'm not a religious person. I think that you probably knew that. But I will say this about the church that we went to. In our town, it's an older style town where they don't want to invite in new things. They're very classical. They don't want recreational things for kids to do. They don't want to open up businesses. So as a result, teens were bored and people were poor, and that was causing fighting within the home. That was causing fighting, amongst other teens, because like, what else is there to do? Everybody's bored and broke. And I remember, at the time where I started going because, of you, but at the time I decided to start going, I remember like everybody around me was doing drugs to do something, and like people were dying and overdosing, and friends were dying. And like the thing is, I was on the cusp of making a decision like that at one point. And, because I was just so filled with pain, because the whole time they were talking about, like, my dad kept saying, like, we're going to have to move eventually because his job got outsourced, and he was like leaving the state to work for a couple of months and then coming back. And it was lonely. I was alone in my house most of the time. And it was hard. It was really hard. I couldn't, like I said, I couldn't keep real relationships because of it, because I always thought I was going to leave. And regardless of your religion or whatever you may feel, the people at that church gave me somewhere to go. They gave me people to talk to. And I'm really grateful that they did that at a time when I really needed it. So, I know people are listening to this, and I don't know what percentage of my fans are religious or not religious or whatever it may be. But know that, like, if these people open their hearts and let other people come in because of their love for their creator and what they feel they need to do and their duty as human beings, then that should be okay with you as it's okay with me, regardless of whatever your beliefs are, because these were genuinely kind-hearted people that, regardless of any political or religion affiliation, they cared about showing up every Thursday, giving kids something to do, giving them somewhere to be, and giving them a positive message.
Yeah. I like that you phrased it that way too, Logan, because that's so true. Like, we definitely came up like in a town where, you didn't have a whole lot of money, you didn't have a whole lot of things to do, and that was just the way it was. And I remember, like, heroin was a big deal, like in where we grew up, and it hurt a lot of lives, and like that was the other option for a lot of people. And like, I agree. Like, I think that there's a lot of like people that I know who kind of went to these youth groups, and not that they even became Christians, but they had that place, and they built some friends, and like it got them through that really hard time. And I think for things like that, it's really great.
Yeah, and aside from one person from that youth group, there is one person who was a part of that youth group in a big way, and kind of turned their back on me. But that, like, that's their life. They're gonna, that's all on them. It's not on, anybody else. But for the most part, everybody who came from that youth group are still very open with me. And there are people that worked at that youth group that I am so completely opposite in many views, whether it be religious or political, but they're just good people. Like, they don't care. They're still very kind. They still have kind things to say. There's still someone that, like, there's still people that go to that youth group. And even though I'm a full grown adult now, I could message them if I was having a hard time, and they would be there emotionally because they care. They care about the people that went to that youth group. They care about people in general. So yeah, like I said, regardless of whatever you believe, this town had a real sickness, and this was a light for youths there, because there wasn't a whole lot for youths there. You couldn't get a job because there's nowhere to work because there was nothing there. You couldn't get a car because nobody had any money to do anything to go out of town because they didn't have a job. Like, it really kind of trapped itself in. And that's another reason why I also think that youth group was so insanely popular, because it had a place for kids to go. They went in looking for something to just do, and they left being more caring people.
Yeah, very well said.
But so anyway, so moving a little bit forward, I joined the youth group. I become friends with all of your youth group friends and everything. But then the day finally comes where I actually am moving, which was insanely hard. But what I want to know is what was your life like post that move? Like, where did you go from? Like, what was the rest of high school like? Because I remember I left drama club. I don't know. I think you became the president after that. Maybe not. But I don't remember what exactly happened. But what did happen after I left?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought this up. So, like, it was so devastating, Logan. Like, I was like, I think it was my senior year. I don't remember. It was junior or senior year.
Yeah, it was your senior year.
That's right. And I remember, like, you had told me that you were moving. I was like, oh my gosh, like, Logan's moving. Like, it was so like hard to like hear. And I was like me and this dude have been like grown close for years. Like, sure, we maybe weren't talking like consistently, but I was like, I feel close to this guy.
Yeah, we were like family for sure.
Big time. And like you mentioned drama club, like you and I were in drama club from, oh my gosh, like what? From when we met on.
Yeah. And I became the first sophomore president of the drama club.
Yeah, it was awesome. And like, I remember I was so excited for that year. So I was like, okay, like, Logan's president of the drama club. I'm VP. Like, we're going to run this thing. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be so fun. And then, I got the news that you were moving. I was like, oh my gosh, like, what's this going to look like? And yeah, and it was interesting because at that point, I had never really been a leader in anything, right? So I never had the opportunity to lead or like do much. And after you left, I was sort of forced to assume the role of president of the drama club.
Yeah.
And I was so nervous. I was like, I think I even asked you for advice. I was like, dude, how do you do this?
I don't remember what I said, but I'm sure I said something.
Yeah, because I was like, I need advice. Like, I've never done this. Like, I remember you doing a great job. And so that was my first sort of like taste of like being a leader, like leading people and kind of like not trying to have it fall apart, you know. But I remember having a great group, and like, you know, you remember this too. We used to do so much improv, and it was typically hilarious.
Yeah, always. I'll say this about the drama club kids: we were definitely like the island of misfit toys. Not everybody could act, you know, or at least not everybody was great at it, or not everybody was confident enough. But the moment where everybody always came together was the improv stuff, because the thing about damaged people or people who have had a hard life is that there are always some people who cope with humor. And our drama club was some of the funniest people all piled together always.
Yeah, I think that description of it being like the land of misfit toys, dude, is perfect. Like, yeah, we were like just the randos in high school, getting together in a group and just sort of like having a great time doing like random improv and like fun games. And shout out to our English teacher, who was fantastic and like gave us a place after school to hang out and to like really get to know each other. Like, he was fantastic.
You talking about Mr. Wozlick?
Mr. Wozlick.
Mr. Woz.
Amazing.
How great. Now, I don't know if it's possible, but maybe since this is a very clean podcast, you can help me. How good would a podcast be with Mr. Wozlick?
Okay, so legit, like, and this is for you, Logan, this is for your viewers, like, and your, you know, those listening, like, if you do make a podcast with Mr. Woz, like, folks got to listen to that, because I know that I would be one of the first lined up to listen to it. This guy has, like, so many great stories, I think, and, like, just a phenomenal life.
And he's such a great educator, too. Like, he genuinely is. Like, I'm not trying to say that to butter him up so he gets on the podcast. I only had him for one class before I moved away, and he was a great educator. He helped me quite a bit.
I would agree, and he really supported the students, and I love that about him too. Like, he batted for us, and like I said, he was like, his classroom was sort of like our safe zone. I always look forward to going there.
And like, he was also like, he was really the butt of a lot of our jokes in a nice way. You know, like, I remember when I was sworn in as president the year before I had to leave, I was like, when I became the president, like after voting. And he was like, all right. And then there was new members of Drama Club, and I had to swear them in. And he was like, he was like kind of annoyed with me because I wasn't prepared, because I didn't realize that was a thing. And he was like, just say some stuff. And like, I just like said the most outlandish things, like, you will bring me your lunch every single day. Like, I just like had them swear all these ridiculous things. He got so mad at me and like pushed me aside and did the swear for me. He's like, I'm sorry, your president's already incompetent at his very first task.
Oh man, I feel like of course I was there because I was your VP. And
yeah, you were crying. No, I remember how you were crying, laughing.
And let me just like, so that whole crying, laughing thing, dude, that happened like every single meeting. One of us was like dying from laughter.
Yeah, I remember Damon dropped the pizza one time, and you went, Bryson, and like everybody believed that it was you.
And I was like getting over being sad about the pizza that we couldn't eat, but I was also like, guys, it wasn't me.
It wasn't.
And we were just like going ham on each other. It was hilarious.
Oh, dude, it was the best. It was absolutely the best. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, man. Like that, like kind of going back to like that year, right? Of like, you know, you had left, and you know, the drama club was there, and to give people an idea, like, I was not an actor, still am not an actor. And I was always on the behind the scenes, like running sound and like doing the light work sometimes.
Do you remember that time we messed up the audio during the play, when we were the audio guys during the play and we played the wrong music? You remember that?
Yes, dude. I was so hoping you'd bring that up.
I think what was even funnier than how disappointed Mr. Wozlick was about it was how instantly you were like ready to throw yourself like on a pike. Like, you were like, no, what have I done? Like, you were acted like you had just ruined the whole play. And afterwards I asked people if they noticed, and like, we didn't even notice.
and okay, leading up to this moment was crazy because so for those listening, we had like in our high school, we had some pretty old fashioned stuff. Like, we had our sound machine only did discs. right? So it was not digital at all. It's still analog.
Yeah.
And I remember I had to create the CD with all the soundtracks, and they had to be in order of when they were going to take place, like during the show.
And I remember I mixed, they asked us to get spooky music, and I got the Beetlejuice theme, and I spliced around like the parts that say Beetlejuice, and I gave you that track, and that was the opening music for the play.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. And I remember, like, we were sort of running late, and like I said, none of us had cars, right? But we all kind of like lived in the town.
We also walked everywhere. We walked everywhere, always,
literally everywhere. So I remember, like, we had to like run to get the CD there in time because the show was coming up, and we had like lost track of time. And I get there, I'm like sweating like profusely, and I got my long hair, right? So my long hair's like knotted up.
It's like sticking to your face. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, it's like sticking to my face, and I'm like, I'm like panting, like, we got the CD, we got to get it in there and save this show.
we were all the heroes of our own anime back then.
At least we dreamed that every day, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
But yeah, man, like it was fun. Like some of my favorite memories of high school and with you was drama club, and was like doing shows and doing all the audio.
I talked about this on a previous podcast, but do you remember when we this was right, like Skyrim had just come out, right? And what we would do is we'd run up to our friends, and when you I definitely told this on another podcast, but it doesn't matter. When you watched and like played Skyrim back in the day, now that the guy goes Fush Rodan and like does the Dragonborn breath and like knocks people over and stuff. When you first started playing it though, everybody didn't know what that was, so people thought he just yelled boosh. And so we as like the drama club kids would always run up to each other, and if you got boosh yelled at, you had to throw all your books and fall on the ground. And I remember Mrs. Catherine was so done with it that she put up a framed sign that said no booshing during play practice and hung it in the auditorium.
That's when we've succeeded.
Yeah, I mean, I just remember people getting so mad because we would do it. We would find the worst times. I mean, we would make sure that it was the worst moment to do it, and then that's the moment we did it because it was so funny to like just see like. It'd be like during the play practice, like we're on stage and we're practicing something, and somebody runs out and goes boosh, and we just like throw all of our stuff and fall down.
Yeah, and dude, like, let's just talk about Skyrim for like a second. Like, how big this game was to my life back then, to your life. Like, I remember like having friends come over to my house, and they would bring their own TVs, and we would set up our own systems, and there'd be like 3 TVs, and we'd all be playing Skyrim just to be in each other's presence, but we're playing this one-player game.
I remember when you took me back to Michigan with you. You had me run D&D campaigns for your friends. Do you remember that?
Dude, how could I forget? Those were amazing.
I just remember how much fun we'd have like playing these games. And do you remember Melvin?
100%.
So do you remember we had this Pokemon RPG? It was kind of like a Dungeons and Dragons Pokemon game where every Pokemon had individual stats and you were a trainer. So it was like you had 6 little character sheets instead of one big one. And I remember there was a moment where I was like, okay, we're gonna take a break. You guys are gonna be able to get supplies. And Melvin was so into the role playing that he pretended to be like a checkout clerk at a Pokemart. Like he got up and started acting. And we were all like, this is so lame. But then by the end of it, we were so excited and like playing like we were inside of the market. And I'm like, we're literally 16 and 17 years old.
Yeah, dude, it was so fun. And to give people an idea, like we played this campaign like I can't lie. I think it was like 11 a.m. in the morning to like midnight.
Yeah.
Like we were doing this all day.
Yeah, probably later than midnight. Probably like 2 a.m. 11 a.m. to like 2 a.m. Yeah. Yeah, we definitely. Yeah, for sure.
And Logan, you'll be excited to hear this, and you'll be hearing this for the first time, which is exciting. Literally, and I can't lie about this. Like a month ago, I actually did a one-shot campaign in the Pokemon D&D.
That's awesome. You brought it back to life.
I did, and so I'm actually currently involved in a D&D campaign. I'm a huge nerd, so I love like anything D&D, like Star Wars, Magic the Gathering. That's like that's my wheelhouse, and we're actually part of a campaign right now, but I did a one shot and I found out that you can actually find Pokemon D&D like a whole guide online, and so I used that.
And was it fun?
It was fun. It was fun. Like, it was just so good to like be different characters and like to have people like different, like, you know, my friends be Pokemon trainers in this world that I'm trying to create. And storytelling to the max. It was great.
I remember like you guys were so into it. Like I was into it too, obviously, but I just remember like we left Michigan, like we went there for a weekend and we came back, and Ronnie was so into it, he came with you back to like finish the campaign. So like for like a week after like we left there, he was at your house and we were doing the campaign and like we finished it. And I just remember like how epic the whole thing was. Like it was like all down to like the final wire. You guys, the end of the campaign was you guys' trainers were fighting each other. And I remember how intense the whole thing was. Do you remember that?
Yeah. And I remember being so excited for like climactic ending. And let me just toot your horn real quick because like I think your craft is so great, and you've been a storyteller your whole life. And
absolutely,
like you know, most of the time you were the one DMing. And like I think even early on, like in high school years, like you just did a great job building stories and sort of like involving us in that campaign. And it's shown because I've told like stories about like our D&D campaigns to so many people throughout these years. So yeah, you definitely made an impact.
That's awesome. What I want to do, if anybody's interested in this, let us know. I want to get like really like super random people from my life and do a campaign as a podcast. Like do like at least a one-off at least as like a podcast. So maybe, I don't know, maybe you could do that with me. That might be fun.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can I say right now that I want to be like first in line for that? Because that would be fantastic.
I want to get the most interesting I want to get the most interesting people to do a podcast D&D campaign. That way it's like such different personalities at the table, you know. I don't know if we might do it like over the phone, or we might do it in person after COVID, but yeah, I mean that'd be really fun to just like do a one-off with a bunch of people.
I'm here for it. Yeah, all day.
So what was it like, getting back to your life, what was it like? Yeah, I know you graduated from LaPorte and everything. What was after high school like?
Yeah, so after high school, so one interesting thing to note is that I'm a first generation student. So, you know, I come from a big family, and none of my family members like went to college or like pursued higher degrees. Kind of like I said earlier on, like we come from like a really like labor heavy family, and so a lot of my brothers and sisters like went into like labor jobs and blue collar positions, and I was sort of like the odd one out where I really enjoyed learning in high school. Like obviously I had my bad days for sure, but I just kind of always like enjoyed learning and going through those motions. So I was in this weird stage my senior year where I'm like, you know, do I pursue college? Like, what does that look like? And like, I don't have any family members who can really help me. So it was this weird thing. And I ended up actually going and living with my brother who lived kind of near Indianapolis. And it was sort of like that fall semester, if you can say. So I wasn't in school, but it was like after high school. Does that make sense? And, you know, like we're looking at colleges, and, you know, my sister-in-law, so his wife, did go to college, so she kind of knew it a little bit better. And looking around and I ended up finding one, Ball State actually is where I ended up going. And it was just like this weird thing of, I can't believe this is happening. And coming from sort of a lower socioeconomic class, one of the biggest words was finances. And luckily I was able to get a big chunk of it paid for because of this thing called the 21st Century Scholars. So all that to say, a lot of those barriers were kind of like open for, like went away from me. And before I knew it, I was a college student. I was like, could not believe it.
Yeah. And I mean, like you went out and you did it. Like, you know, there's a lot to say about actually having like the wherewithal and like the grit to actually not only go to college, but finish the degree, you know, like really do it. And you did it, man. Like, and I'm really proud of you for that.
Thanks, man. And honestly, it sort of like tie together the story we were just talking about with drama club and my college education. So like, okay, it's a classic dilemma of a new student, right? Like, what are you going to major in?
Yeah.
And like, but, and maybe you know this too, just kind of knowing me, Logan, but like, I was never a kid who had goals growing up. right? I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I was just kind of going through the motions. But I was like, I really enjoyed kind of running sound for theater, and I loved that. So I was like, Ball State has the telecommunications program. Like, I'll do that, right? Kind of working with that. And that's what I ended up majoring in.
And yeah, the radio telecommunications. And did you graduate from Ball State too?
I did. So yeah, I did go through those 4 years. And obviously, like, a lot happened within those 4 years. Like, a lot of transformation and, like, just kind of knowing myself better and kind of knowing what I wanted to do. I got closer to my faith and sort of, like, learned more about, like, what my identity is in my faith, which is really helpful because in high school I had really no idea. And I was, like, still in that stage where I'm like, well, what am I going to do? Like, what do I want to do and go into in life? And I started out sort of like working in radio a little bit, like early on in my college career. And I was part of the radio station and was sort of like reviewing music and stuff for the rotation. And all that was fun, but it didn't really give me a whole lot of fulfillment. So I sort of like pushed that to the side. And then one of my sort of like mid-college classes was sound editing. And we actually had to create an EP for a local band.
Gotcha.
And so we had an artist come in and recorded, 5 tracks and, mixed and edited it and sent it out. And that was a super great experience. I cherished that, but I was still missing something. It didn't give me fulfilling. Like it wasn't like, it was fun, but it wasn't like there for me,
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until sort of like the tail end of my college career where I sort of like started dabbling more into film. And it was perfect because I was able to see in picture form the sound that I was creating come to life, right? And specifically, one of my favorite art forms for sound is Foley editing and Foley being a Foley artist. And for those listeners who don't know what that is, it's kind of like where you're doing footsteps for like a movie, and you're kind of watching the movie in front of you, and you're doing the footsteps like in live sequence. You're doing sound effects, and it's just like a lot of fun.
Yeah, you're making it with like odd things like sponges and like clanking pans and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, like breaking bones with celery, and it's a blast. Yeah. So I really enjoyed that, and I did a few short films and directed my own short film, and was really going down that path, and it was great. Now, on the same side, so about halfway through my college career, I got a job as a resident assistant. And for folks who don't know what that is, that's essentially a role where like you're kind of like, and I hate that I'm saying this, but it might give a good picture of like sort of the hall monitor for the floor, but it's more than that. So what like a resident assistant like kind of knows their residents on their floor, and like they are going to help them and sort of advise them on different things, like, oh, here's where the tutoring center is, here's where the writing center, and like let's talk about life and get to know each other, right? So did that for like 2.5 years, so super long term, and I really enjoyed it because I liked talking with people, and I liked kind of knowing about their lives and sort of investing in people.
Yeah. And
that was something I didn't really think about that maybe I would enjoy doing. And so I was sort of torn, right? So senior year, I'm like, do I want to do more things like this, or do I want to go into film? And I learned kind of quickly that I'm a guy of stability.
Yeah.
And as folks who work in like the art industry know, sometimes there's not some stability in there, right?
No,
Logan?
Definitely not, buddy. Definitely. Even when you're doing really well, there's not a lot of stability sometimes. So yeah, I totally relate.
Exactly. So I was like, I love working with people. I love kind of being invested in their lives. I want to do more of this. So what I ended up doing next was I started looking for graduate school and sort of like that next stage of my education career, because I looked ahead and saw that a lot of the jobs that I wanted to go into required a master's degree. Mm-hmm. So looking around, I found one at Oakland University in Michigan, which is funny because, as you know, Logan, a lot of my history also involves Michigan. So
yeah, I mean, you spent a lot of time in Michigan for sure.
Yeah, so it's kind of bouncing back between Michigan and Indiana. And so I ended up getting accepted to Oakland University, and I was sort of earning my higher education leadership master degree. Still not knowing specifically what I wanted to do. Okay, so it took me a long time.
Yeah, career student.
Big time. Exactly. And it worked out too because a big part of my life then too is that I was actually dating my now wife.
Congratulations, by the way. Just saying.
Thank you.
Very excited.
Appreciate it.
She's Cincinnati.
We had her 1 year.
Is she Cincinnati local, right?
Not a local, so she actually, it's kind of funny. She grew up in Elkhart, which Logan would know because that's neighboring towns with LaPorte.
Yeah.
But she did an internship and kind of like worked in Cincinnati for a while. And while I was up in Michigan doing my grad program, she was actually working full time in Cincinnati.
Wow. That's crazy.
So that was kind of crazy. We were still dating then. And yeah, those drives were long, man. Like it's like a 4-hour drive from Detroit to.
Trust me, yeah, I'm well aware. I've had to travel this area quite a bit. I understand completely.
Yeah, but shout out to Cincy. I do love Cincy. It's great. It's a great city.
Yeah, you guys got to come visit and stay at the studios, you know?
I would love to actually, like, totally we got to catch up and talk in person once COVID's over.
Yeah, once COVID's not like a thing, things will be a lot different. But anyway, continue. Sorry.
Yeah, for sure. So there I am, you know, going to grad school and talk about, like, pushing boundaries, right? So I'm coming from this family that no one's ever gone to college, and I have a lot of pressure on me now because not only do I have an undergrad degree, but now I'm earning my graduate degree. And so I'm like, I never dreamed that I would be this far in my education. And, you know, did the 2-year program. And at the end of it, I actually did an internship where I was working in the career center. Okay. Mm-hmm. And kind of like working with students on my like resumes and the cover letter and sort of getting them career ready and doing all that. And I realized that I love that. I like sort of like mixing all the things, and I as I thought about it, I was piecing it together in my life, like working alongside people, being a resident assistant, even drama club, and like all the way back. That kind of like having and working with people was sort of my passion. That's where I got fulfillment.
Yeah,
and so that's kind of what leads me to. So I graduated from Oakland and looked for a job in career, and that's kind of where I'm working right now as a career advisor at Indiana Wesleyan University. And what's ironic is that, you know, I was a kid who didn't have any goals growing up, and now I'm helping students with their goals.
It's funny how that works out, isn't it?
Yep. So that's how I got to where I'm at right now.
That's awesome, man. I mean, so so is this like the point where like you found the career spot? Is there still like a larger career aspiration, or is this like your big thing? Like I don't understand the job that well, so I don't know if like you're planning on going to an even larger job after this, if there's like an in-between thing, or is like this is your actual career?
Yeah, it's a super good question, and one that I'm still figuring out. But
yeah, of course, you're always on the thought process.
That's right. Yeah, I'm always like, oh, what's the next step? You know, what's going on? And I have given it some thought, and you know, I still would love to do like working in film freelance. You know, maybe like working with people and sort of like doing audio for my home studio. Like that would be great long term. But I've been kind of realizing more and more that the idea of maybe being a freelance coach or like working, you know, in the future, sort of working through my home or like through others of coaching people throughout their life. I think I like the idea of that coach figure, and sort of like giving people life guidance and career advice and career guidance. Sounds super fulfilling and something that I would love to do.
Yeah, man, you're insanely talented. Like that's the one thing that I can always say is that and what you might lack in talent, which you don't lack anything, but if let's say you weren't even talented, you're also like an insanely hard worker. So I know whatever you do plan on like landing on, or or whatever things you try out to do, I got full faith that you're going to come through and do it. Because you've always been that way, whether it was when we were working with music, whether it was about our friendship, you know, whatever it was, youth group, you know, you were always incredibly involved. You give 110%. And I think that's something that a lot of people, you know, could really get from your story is that, like, you know, your circumstance doesn't have to define you, and you can really accomplish something. You know, you were somebody who is, you know, like you said, first generation student who had really a troubling, you know, situation happen to you during high school. You lived in a town that was not exactly very open with possibilities. and you've made something out of yourself, and that's something that people should look to when they're looking for inspiration.
Yeah, thank you, man. And of course, I'm not without my faults. I appreciate gassing me up. I love that. But yeah, absolutely, and it's still a journey, and it's a journey that I'm on, and that I'm excited to be on. And obviously now I've got my life partner in my wife, and I think us molding our lives together and sort of seeing where are we going next. And honestly, I can see myself being a stay-at-home dad for a while, doing freelance film on the side, or freelance coaching. So I would love that. That'd be great, hanging out with the kiddos.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, everybody's path is totally different, and I think that you having an idea of what you want, being also within the realm of what you can do is a good thing. Sometimes I have to kind of stop myself a little bit, because I'll want to do something that in this moment, if I can't get it done, I'm I'll never get it done. Right now, you're talking about making features. Obviously I'm very interested in film. I would love to make a feature, but it's kind of not really an option right now with what's going on. But because of that, there's a part of me that's always oh, I guess I'll never be able to do it then. I think one of the things that you kind of exemplify is you keep your dreams, you understand that it's about the long game. Like you said, you're trying to figure out what your next move is, but you're not casting anything out. You're still talking. Maybe I'll be a stay-at-home life coach. Maybe I'll do film stuff on the side. Maybe I'll do this. That's the way you should be. It should measure your expectations and also understand that it's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah, and exactly. Taking it day by day, sort of reflecting on what your interests are, what your goals are, what you just love to do, man, and sort of then finding your options and saying what is out there, what can I do? And there's a lot out there that if even if folks are listening, they're I don't know what I want to do. Keep true to just what you love, and don't stop looking out for those things. And where it starts, honestly, is internally. If you know yourself and your values, where you hope to be, and if you can visualize sort of where you'll be in your future, you can sort of piece together the steps that you need to take to get there. But I think it's important to visualize it and make that true in your life, and then pursue it wholeheartedly.
Could you imagine telling young Bryson that older Bryson would be in a position where he's I could do freelance sound design, or I could do could you imagine speaking to your younger self and be that's the kind of position you'll be in with hard work, that's where you're gonna be? Okay,
that's hilarious you said that, because honestly, there are a lot of days I'm what would I say to that young emo kid back in high school? Right?
Yeah.
Dude, don't change up your style.
Change up your probably leave the studded belt at home.
Yes, yeah. Keep the skate jeans, but lose the belt. Right.
Yeah.
And I think honestly, and this is so true and kind of cliche, it's if you knew the future that you had when you were growing up, you probably wouldn't believe it. Yeah. And I think if I were to go back in time, tell my my sophomore year high school self, hey, this is what's going to happen in your life, and this is where you're going to be in 10 years, I would not have believed it at all. I would have said, whatever, old man, get out of here.
Yeah. Get out of here with your natural hair color and it at an appropriate length.
Yeah, exactly. Right. You and your your baggy pants wearing fool.
Yeah.
And yeah. So I 100% thought about that. I'm it's kind of great that we can't see into the future, because I don't know if we would be up for the challenge if we did. I think that's the challenge of life, is kind of going through things as they come at you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's see here. I mean, I think we might have it in the bag. Is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I've got one last thing, I think, before we sign off, and this is for probably everybody. And Logan, I think this is true for you too, man. But like I said, one of my most foundational moments in my life was when my dad passed away. Mm-hmm. And the idea of living with grief is very true to just our human life, right? Things are going to happen. We're going to get hurt, and we're going to have to find ways of sort of coping with that. And one of my favorite movies is actually Babadook.
Yeah, the Babadook, man. I love that movie.
Babadook is fantastic, and for folks who haven't seen it, you should check it out. it's this horror movie, and usually like, horror movies are fine. Like, of course, like you watch them to be scared, or like usually the story is like not there for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, they pump them out for like $100 and make like $3 million. They're not going to try very hard sometimes. Yeah.
Exactly right. But usually speaking, like horror films don't really like talk about those hard hitting emotions that we have as humans. One thing that I love about Babadook is like they actually like, and I'm not going to spoil it, but they really do grief well. And it's so true that if you're somebody, and I think most of us are, where you're living with grief in one form or fashion, it's something that never goes away. You're always living with it. And it shows itself every once in a while, right? And you sort of have to find healthy ways of sort of handling it. I think it's okay to be real about that and to feel those feelings. I think that's so healthy. And so just wanted to say that before we stop the podcast, of like, if any of you guys are going out there with grief, or if you have lost a loved one recently, that, it might get easier for sure. But it's okay to like still feel that grief years later, because it's just reality, and I think it's healthy and it's healing.
And I think, just to kind of give my little 2 cents about it, because I've dealt with my fair share. I think the grief can also be a really, really good motivator. I think once you're feeling your feelings, not only are you more connected with who you are and what's going on, but I think it also gives you, I guess you could say, perspective that like, okay, things are not always going to be perfect, and things are not always going to be clean, and like not everything plans and things don't go always the way you expect. So find that in you, like, okay, this horrible thing happened to me, or, the same way it happens to anybody. I'm going to either, that person I lost, I'm going to make them proud, or that situation I had, I'm going to prove to somebody that situation doesn't define me. And I think that is a great motivator for people. So like, if it's good to feel your emotions. I think not only is it healthy, but it will drive you to do what you want to do great things.
Yeah. Very well said. I love that. And like, sort of like, it was true for me in my life, and I think it could be true for a lot of people, of like, sort of like dealing with that grief and those tragedies really sort of, I like what you said, Logan, giving you perspective. And I think that's exactly what happened with my life, where a lot of like the day-to-day stuff that I was worried about just fell away. And I was like, I don't care about any of those things I cared about before, in that moment.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's like, for me in my life, right, in my journey, that's where I think and I feel that God met me, because I didn't have those walls up anymore. And I ended up finding something that I wasn't even looking for.
Yeah.
Right. And not that like that's going to happen for everybody, but there's probably a lot of introspective that happens for folks with grief, where it might not be like a God moment, but you'll have a different aha moment, or like a creative breakthrough, or something that will really help out your life.
But that's only going to happen when you do things like for instance, with you went up to you did that, I guess you could quote unquote call it embarrassing or whatever. You went up to the front and tried it. The same thing goes with like these emotions. Like, just like if you feel it, like feel it, like don't push that away. Don't push grief away. You have to let it exist. You have to acknowledge it. And then, like we talked about, use it for something, but you have to be open and willing to do that. Because if you just shelter yourself off thinking this horrible thing happened to me, so as a result, I can't, be successful, or I lost this person. So since this person's gone, I don't know who I am without that person. You have to, it's a part of everybody's journey, and everybody, is struggle is finding out who you are, from that, and accepting it, as well as doing everything in your power to improve yourself and make yourself who you want to be, and accomplish what you want to accomplish. But you have to be willing to accept it and take it in.
Yeah, 100%. And here's a challenge too, like, cry in front of your friends. Cry in front of like people you care about. And it is so freeing. And like, you guys, like, you'll feel closer to one another. It'll feel super awkward, but instead of holding those emotions in, show them. And like, people will give you love that you never thought about. And I think that a lot of times can be just as healing and just as impactful.
Yeah. I mean, I think everybody knows that sometimes life can be so isolating because a 90% of the dialogue in your life is in your own head, you know? Like, there are things that you say to yourself, there are things that you think. And there's a stigma of weakness where it's like, if you share how you're feeling, that in some way means that you're not strong enough to handle it on your own. Well, the real strength is finding in yourself to be vulnerable, because closing yourself off is the weakest thing you could do. It shows that you don't want to try and live it and feel it. And I think that if you want to be strong, the way to do that is to be open and be vulnerable. And I love that I'm in a position where I can share stories like Bryson's and other friends and share my own. And people, it's a little bit of a sleeper hit. You know, they come for like comedy or like introspection, interesting stories, and they leave with the perspective that people who have gone through it have. You know, they kind of get where you're coming from more because they listen to this and they understand. Because I guarantee you, there's at least one person out there. He's got his little beanie on and his studded belt and his skinny jeans, and he's thinking, well, this guy, he's found happiness in a marriage. He's found a career. He's stable for himself, and he's a really well articulated, educated person. I could do that too. Yeah,
I love that. And you better believe that there's some like, those studded belt kids, and I love them, man. Love you guys. Because that was me, man. That was you, Logan, and
absolutely
so many of us.
Makeup too. I was the whole 9 yards.
Oh yeah, the eyeliner for days.
Yeah, the eyeliner. Yeah, the guy liner, as we called it. We really called it that. That's not a joke. We really did refer to it as that, and it was really upsetting.
Unfortunately, yeah, we did.
All right, guys. So if you liked this, make sure to, if you're on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. This is on a new YouTube channel for me. This is my personal YouTube channel. So if you want to subscribe to that, it's Logan Tyler. If you liked listening to me talk and you've never heard my other podcasts, you can check them out. One is a film podcast called Crosscut Cinema, youtube.com/Crosscut Cinema. You can listen to it there, or you can listen to anywhere you get podcasts, as well as my other podcast, which is a film podcast that I do with recording artist CL Blue and my fiance, in which we talk about TV show pilots. You can check that out. It's called a Pilot Podcast at YouTube. It's available everywhere, Apple, Spotify, whatever it may be. Is there anything, I know you're not a very public figure, but is there anything you wanted to add, anything you want to plug?
Ooh, not necessarily. Love you, man. Thank you so much for having me. And we gotta catch up more often. For sure.
Absolutely. All right, y'all. See ya.